Welcome to the Virtual CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping service-based businesses achieve success. Are you a business owner interested in learning how to scale your business? Has your business reached over $1 million in annual revenue? Then this podcast is for you.
Welcome to episode 3. Today's topic is going to be a good one. A lot of CPA firms out there today are advertising about virtual CFO services. So today we're going to talk about what virtual CFO services means to Summit and how it can help digital agencies. Today we have Jody Grunden, the CEO and owner of Summit CPA, and Michelle Lesifko, one of our all-star CFOs, to talk about this topic. So Jody, why don't you start us off and talk about how Summit started using that term?
Back in probably it was 2004-ish, we were looking to market the product or market the service, and we didn't want to do it in the newspaper or in the phone book or the typical things at that time. And so we were looking to use the computer and use Google and try to market it through the web. And in doing so, we tried to look at different things like outsource CFO to see if maybe that would rank in the top on the front page, and it wouldn't. We were page 50 and so forth. We knew we couldn't actually manage it if we were that far back. So we looked for something a term that was not being used at the time that we could rank on the front page. And so we went through the dictionary, thesauruses, everything, trying to figure out what would work. And we said virtual. How about virtual CFO? Would that work? And my partner Adam, he's like, I don't know. It sounds like it's not real. I'm like, well, it'll actually be on the front page if we do it. And we let's give it a try. And so we started coining the term virtual CFO back in 2004 on the web, and we were front page, right away. We were number one ranking in Google, which was great because it was like, wow, that was kind of easy. We picked the term and now we're number one, but that also means that no one else was looking for it. And which was the opposite side of it. And so we had to think, well, how can we actually market this and go forward with it? And so we continued using virtual all the way through virtual CFO. And then it was like 7-8 years later, we actually had our first client from the website, somebody that we couldn't actually physically meet and go see. And so, from there it kind of blossomed. The term kind of kicked on. Everybody was started using it, became more and more traction. And so, it's kind of cool. Really, any kind of CPA firm you'll look at today will have that listed as a service that they offer. And the cool thing is we've been offering it since 2004. So pretty cool overall.
So you said outsource CFO, you said virtual CFO. Are there any other terms that companies use that either of you guys are familiar with that kind of fall into the same category?
Oh, part-time CFO, you've got fractional CFO, many, many different variations of that term. Well, the one that's prominent, though, I think is the virtual CFO.
Okay. Yeah, because you talk about fractional CFO, a lot of time that's a part-time coming in to fix problems, right? And we really, on our virtual CFO services, we're not part-time, correct, Michelle?
Correct. We are definitely not part-time. We're integrated with the team.
So kind of adding to that, with Jamie, what you're talking about, I think, is you're saying, hey, come in and solve a problem, so they'll hire that person for, a project. And so they may bill, 500-600 hours on that project to get it done. And then afterwards they're gone. They may leave a nice little binder explaining what they did and how they did it, which is cool because that's what they're hired to do. But what Michelle's saying is that, no, we're actually part of the team, right? So we actually are meeting with those individuals weekly, a lot of times, a couple times a week, at least at a bare minimum on a monthly basis, to go over everything, that a typical CFO would do. And the idea is not to be, one and done. The idea is to be, long term. So we want to be there year after year over year. And ideally, as the company grows, we want to grow with the company. And so, we may start off with $1 million company that may grow to a $10 million company, which is pretty cool. We'll just add more resources onto it behind the scenes to make sure that we can handle that type of a thing. So growth is real easy when it comes to the duration, how long we're actually with a client.
Great. So Michelle, if I'm a digital agency and I just hired Summit as a CFO firm, what can I expect from you? And what's the difference really between a CFO firm and the traditional accounting / bookkeeping that I have been receiving?
Yeah, I think the big piece, and like I said, it starts with we're part of the actual company. I consider myself, as well as all of the other CFOs, that we are part of the management team. So as part of, I kind of consider, I think the name of virtual CFO, I think a lot of times kind of gets the majority of those that are out there are more of that accounting bookkeeping factor, whereas Summit sets us apart, whereas we come with an entire firm. So we are there to, yes, aid in the accounting and the bookkeeping if necessary, but really we're forward looking. We're really wanting to help build the company to where it wants to go and being partnered with them in the different decisions, whether it's just status quo, making sure we get enough cash in the bank to kind of keep things going, or it's a matter of, hey, there may be a possible acquisition or a merger or, an investment or a downsize. There's so many aspects, and we are integral parts to that entire conversation. And we're part in helping build that whole progression, whatever it may be. So that's where I think it really does come into the play of, yes, we are part of the team. We're not just kind of coming in, seeing what we can do, fix it, and be done. We're always kind of forward thinking as well.
Great. So what does it look like on a week-to-week basis or day-to-day basis if I do hire Summit as a virtual CFO firm?
At least once a week we're meeting, and sometimes it varies depending on the client, but many times there's already an existing management meeting that's already there, a leadership style meeting that the majority of the management is there. We become part of that meeting as well. So the CFO would be a part of that, and whether they're active in it or just listening to, because sometimes even just not hearing or not participating within those meetings, we really pick up so much. So we're part of those, but then as well as we'll be partaking into the forecast part, the financial statement, of course, the financial statement meetings, a pipeline meeting / kind of a revenue rec, depending on the service that's there, and then just kind of an ad hoc meeting. So we have a specific cadence each month that we go through. Each week has a different agenda, but we kind of follow that path. And so you have at least once a week of those type meetings. And then if we are doing cash flow, sometimes those are incorporated within the meeting, or we have an off meeting that the accountant would be available as well to be doing the cash flow meeting. We don't want to necessarily push that to the side, but we want to make sure we have enough time for each one. But I feel too that yes, we have a normal weekly cadence of discussing, but that doesn't mean you can't talk to me until the next week. Of course, there's always, yes, we're remote. That's where the direct messaging, whether it's Slack or whatever ways that they're communicating, or even just random phone calls, just to kind of get on those things of, you're not necessarily having to wait to have those discussions until the next meeting. So that is kind of the high level.
Yeah, great. Now, the way I always describe it to our CFOs and to potential clients and existing clients is, a lot of our listeners have worked for agencies and worked in smaller agencies, but I spent a lot of my time working with corporations and large corporations, and I hardly ever saw a CEO walking down the hall without the CFO right next to him. Like that's the role of the CFO, is to be there, because oftentimes the CEO has this great idea and they want to bounce it off of someone, and the CFO is the perfect person because they can say, well, I have this great idea, and the CFO can run some numbers and really help you answer those type of questions. And well, this is what that idea could do, or this is the other side of it. It could also lose you all this money as well. So that's just a partner in crime is kind of how I look at it in a lot of ways.
Yes. And I think sometimes too, along with a partner in crime, a devil's advocate, because sometimes, especially digital agencies, they're very creative. They wear their hearts on their sleeves and they're ready to go and they're ready to do things and they get excited. And we're kind of that, okay, let's step back and look at the big picture and see how it is. And yes, it may be a great avenue, but let's just make sure the risk is covered as well as understood.
Great. So Jody, back to you here. So if I'm a digital agency, what's the difference between hiring Summit CPA and hiring a full-time CFO? And why wouldn't I just take that route if the CFO is so important?
It depends upon the client and the client's needs for the most part. With Summit, the biggest thing that you would get as with a fractional CFO or a virtual CFO is that you're going to get a team of individuals that can actually help you out. Whereas a CFO all by themselves is kind of limited to the resources they have internally. Whereas when you outsource like someone like a Summit, you're going to get not only one individual that's actually overseeing the account, but you're also going to get the availability to access other individuals within that firm. For instance, Michelle may be great at profit sharing, but maybe not great at mergers and acquisitions. So, she can actually tap into, one of many other CFOs on there for help if that topic ever comes up. So it gives the ability to leverage other resources within the firm. And a lot of times, people say, yeah, we come to you because you've got great industry knowledge. Even with a brand new CFO, it's real easy to get that industry knowledge because they can leverage everybody else on the team. So just because, somebody's new to the firm or have been with the firm for a long time, that knowledge is there where they can actually pop up the dictionary kind of, and, or pop up the encyclopedia and get that information from other sources within the firm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that aspect. And I think that's what sets us apart. And that's one thing that I love to share with my clients is that, yes, you are hiring Summit, but when you're hiring Summit, you're not just hiring the team that is assigned to you per se. Myself, as well as my accountants, yes, we have a good, knowledge and breadth, but if a question comes across that I may not have a full understanding or may have just recently heard in one of our internal meetings that someone else is experiencing, I can tap into that. And then the other huge factor is we do have a full tax department as well. So whether you're hiring our services for tax along with the CFO, even just questions, like I kind of have a half and half where some of my clients do have tax, some don't. But with that, like to know that I have an additional resource or he can just pop in and have a conversation because those tax laws are always changing and we're always looking, and it means a lot to know that, okay, yes, I have, Michelle is my CFO, but no, I have Michelle plus all of Summit that's behind us. So it's a huge factor.
And we're very intentional about making sure our team meets, even though we're virtual. I mean, we have 2 or 3 meetings a week where we just talk shop. And I think a lot of those conversations, when we first started, we were a little worried. We're like, we're just going to have an open forum. How long is this meeting going to last? And they last overtime a lot of times just because we're too busy talking about something that one client's doing that another client is thinking about doing. So to Jody's point, like someone who's new to our firm and just started 2 weeks ago is going to get pretty jumped in right away because of those meetings and because of the tools that we created for people to be able to research different issues. And so it's definitely the industry knowledge does help a lot. Mm-hmm. So Michelle, you mentioned forecasting earlier, and I think that's a big key for a lot of listeners here. So when we do the forecasting process, can you go into that a little bit? Because that really is the key to forward looking. So can you kind of go through that forecasting process?
Absolutely. I like to always kind of share that, yes, it's great to know how you did, but you can't really change much of that. So really it's, okay, how have you done? And now what are we looking to achieve going forward? And with our forecasting, we definitely, like right now, we're key into looking into 2020, and that's really important. However, we're assessing how we're doing along the way every single month. So our forecasting, we're taking the actual results of what's happened throughout the year. So right now, I'm looking at, September from, year-to-date September and seeing how we're going to finish out the rest of this year. And then as well as 2020, because so many things can change within a month that could have a huge trajectory difference on how you're going to finish out the year. And so based on those decisions, we're going to want to say, okay, do we need to adjust? Can we accelerate something? How can we make sure we're looking at it? And then not only are we looking at the full picture, but especially we really focus in on that pipeline as well to make sure that those numbers are going to be reached. And especially in digital agencies, we really can't look much farther out than about a couple months, but those 2 months are crucial. So we want to make sure we have what's in the pipeline is there, that we can meet it. If not, are there adjustments that we need to make? And then it's not just the income statement, but then if we do see a little bit of a downturn, let's look at the balance sheet as well. I think that's another big factor too that I love, that we are looking at the impact of what the income statement is doing, direct correlation to the balance sheet. And we have the tools in place to be able to kind of build that out and see the effect that does have, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 6 months down the road. What are we looking at? And that's such an important factor that I know is key to make some of those significant decisions that may have to happen.
Yeah, when Michelle's talking about the balance sheet, she's talking about cash and lines of credit and debt and so forth. So what she's doing is she's taking the financials. We're making we're making changes right away based on what she's talking about. Different things. Life examples that hit. And we decide, hey, based on what happened, this or we're projecting to happen, not only here's what the net income is going to be at the end of the year, here's what we're going to pay tax on, that type of thing. Yeah. But here's what the cash is going to look like. Cash is going to be short in November. So what are we going to do today when we have time to make those changes, basically make those proactive changes today? Or maybe, the idea is, hey, I want to be debt free by end of 2020. How are we going to make that happen? And so by flipping it over to the balance sheet, she can show the client, hey, based on that, here's how we're paying down the debt. Here's how we're building cash. And then we have hiccups along the way. Well, here's how that impacted it now. So instead of paying down debt as quickly as we thought, maybe we're a little bit slower paced, or maybe it's a quicker pace because we're doing really well. And so those are the kind of the key things, the tangible things that people can talk about. Michelle and her team can actually go ahead and project how that will actually happen.
Yeah, and then once the forecast is set, and I think a lot of companies do budgets, and some companies that even the really good ones will do forecasts. But the one thing that we do a lot is we use the forecast as a tool. So like if you come to me and say, hey, we have this great digital agency, but I also want to open a coffee shop, we can put that into the forecast and say, okay, how many cups of coffee do you need to sell, and build that out for you and help you understand how those decisions will affect the bottom line. And I think that's a lot of times what we do is we don't just look at the forecast and move on from it. We throw a lot of projections in there. And a lot of times, anytime anyone's asked any type of question, that's the first thing we do is open up that forecast and try to run some numbers through there. So that is true.
And I think what else is great too is that we do take it one step further, is that when we are finalizing the next year, so when we finalize 2020 where we want it to be, that becomes our plan. So and we know nothing really ends up as planned. And so really we can say, okay, well, we progress and we can see how our forecast is doing. And our forecast constantly changes because of the actuals that are coming into it. But we're always looking back to, well, what was our original plan? What was the original, and why are we different? And is this an understood? Okay, this makes sense. Okay, no, we weren't anticipating this. And if that is the case, how can we possibly proactively project that going forward if need be? So I think that's another key factor that I think goes a whole nother level of just the forecast.
Definitely. Great. So the other tool you mentioned when you were talking earlier was about the cash flow. So could you dig into a little bit about that and what that looks like and how often that meeting is held and really what's the value of that?
Absolutely. So I kind of like to think that, yes, the forecast even has that cash flow piece. Our forecast looks on a monthly basis throughout, we can go anywhere from 3 to 5 years, even on a monthly basis on our forecast, which is excellent. But then we need to go even narrower. And our cash flow does that by looking out 13 weeks. So we can go down to the day of seeing when things are going to hit, both incoming as well as outgoing, and try and project and see where our cash is going to be over the next 13 weeks. It takes an analysis of what we did the last week. We meet weekly to get an understanding because that's really key. Usually we're meeting right before normal payment process happens so we can see where we're at and how much cash we have to cover the needs of the next week and to see if we need to shift anything depending on the cash needs. And what I like to do normally is, depending on the circumstance, it can go down to the effect of, even past due and when things are happening and when things are going. I'm a devil's advocate, so I like to do worst case scenario. And I say, okay, if we don't collect another dime, how long can this cash last us? And that can kind of give some comfort, but also know, okay, we're going to collect some. I mean, we sure hope, but if something does go downturn, this is how long our doors are going to stay open, is really what it is. So this kind of gives a little bit of comfort to some of the owners as well to understand, but then also to kind of see, okay, well, crap, but look at how much we have still left in outstanding AR. Good God, if we could just get over that, then this could take us even farther. So giving that really detail, and it also kind of is aware of, okay, do we have some troublesome clients? Should we not be working with them? I mean, it really can go so deep. Or payables, what can we do with some of these payables to kind of where some cost savings are? Why is this growing so much? And then another big factor that is key too, as well as kind of what Jody had brought into the fact, is if there is debt, we're building that out. How quickly, whether it's a weekly payment, a monthly payment, whatever it may be, if we want to accelerate it, if we got a little wiggle room, and seeing how some of that debt plays into factor too.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that the cash flow is really important. And I think that especially with digital agencies, because a lot of ones that we start working with right away, we always encourage recurring revenue, but a lot of them live project to project. So, what could look really strong today, 90 days from now could not. You didn't close 2 out of those 3 deals that you were hoping to close. And then you really you could go from my cash is fine to, oh boy, I need help, and have that conversation weekly. Just really helps you feel comfort in that area.
Right. Yeah. And you're looking ahead and you're seeing, okay, if I don't get, and that's a big thing on collections. If you got some troublesome collectors, then, that plays a huge factor. And we're looking practically down to the day. So when payroll comes around, it's not a big surprise of where money's going to come from to cover payroll or what have you.
So Jody, if I look at the Summit website, we have 3 levels of services. Can you dive into those a little bit and kind of tell what the difference between the transactional, controller, and CFO level of services are?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the transactional level is what typically that we see other CPA firms offer. It's basically a historical look at the financial statements on a monthly basis, usually done by the 10th of the month, in which we're kind of digging back and showing, hey, here's how you did, and here's how things are going. It's more of a security blanket for those that really don't want to spend the money, don't want to, or feel that they've got a really good grasp on everything else. They can kind of just look back and say, hey, here's how we did, the last month, last year to date, that sort of thing. The controller is where we actually start implementing the forecasting side. So forecasting and high-level KPIs. And what I mean by high-level KPIs, it's not the KPIs you're going to find in your FreshBooks or your QuickBooks or Xero, where it's financial KPIs. Mostly it's non-financial KPIs, things that we can actually control. And so with those, we're looking at the high level, showing you, hey, for a digital agency, a lot of times it's average bill rate, it's utilization rate, it's full-time equivalents, different things that we have actual physical control of, and so we'll actually show those non-financials and how those are impacted and while we're creating the forecast. But it also does include wrapping up the financial statement, similar to the transactional. We're wrapping up the financial statement, making sure that it's a financial statement presented on a timely basis, typically 10 days, after the month's end. And then the CFO service, which is like an all-encompassing service. So really anything goes with that. So you're looking at job costing, we're looking at the forecast, we're looking at the KPIs. We're actually digging in deeper on the KPIs. Instead of looking just at the high level, company level, we're looking at the internal level. So you're looking at employee profitability, job profitability per client as the job is going, as it completed, so that we're tracking, hey, how are things coming along, type of things. So we can make those reactive or proactive adjustments along the way. It may be on billing type. It may be, hey, every time we have a flat fee client, we lose. And so maybe we're not adding enough cushion to it. Whereas if we have an hourly rate client, we come out ahead all the time. Or a value-based client, we come out even more ahead. So it gives us that ability to actually look internally to see how things are going. So the way that look at that is we're taking full responsibility or ownership of that, of the financial statement process. A lot of times that's done, both the controller and the CFO level is done with the accompanying of somebody on the other side, meaning that they may have a team of individuals or one individual or a couple individuals on staff that we will oversee and help that process through. And that typically we see that about 70% of our clients actually have somebody on staff. And then about 30%, we are that staff, as Michelle mentioned, and we can do the back office. And so the back office can be incorporated in any one of those levels of service. If they want us to do cash flow, or if they want us to pay bills or do accounts receivable, we can incorporate those types of duties inside, from the transaction all the way to the CFO as kind of an add-on. And we do that for various clients depending upon their needs and wants as they go through. So all-encompassing, it's like you get everything on the CFO, and then you're very limited on the transactional. So all three are high-level services. And when I say high-level, but with the transactional, it's definitely a step up from what clients have had in the past, even if they've had that type of service, because we are truly meeting with them on a monthly basis, going over information and helping them, relate even at the smallest level.
So if I'm listening to this podcast, and what's the one thing in my back of my mind, or the thing I'm thinking of where I might need to go down this path? Is there a certain question I keep asking myself, or what makes me think I need a CFO? Like, what time should I call, start asking around for virtual CFO firms? I'll start with you, Jody.
Well, usually when you're asking that question, it's pretty much the time to start looking. We typically see clients come to us when they've exceeded the $1 million mark. Typically when under the $1 million mark, they still feel they've got a lot of capacity internally to do things themselves. And for the most part, it's a pretty good idea for them to do a lot of things themselves. But if they're in high growth, then that's a little different. So if they're in high growth at the under $1 million, well, then maybe it is looking at hey, we need to hire somebody that can actually make sure that we grow profitably, through that. However, typically we see people start reaching out about $1 million to $1 million, I'd say $1.5 million in revenue, which equates to about 10 to 15 employees. And those folks are looking for somebody that can take a little burden off the owner's shoulders, so that the owner can then do other things. Or maybe they've entrusted a bookkeeper to do their stuff, and now they need somebody a little bit more advanced. And so they're wondering, hey, am I missing something? Can I be more profitable? What should I be focusing on? All the different things that are kind of keeping them up at night. That's the burden that we help take off their shoulders. And then when they hit about the $3 million mark, that's typically when we see them that they want a full level service where they're wanting a CFO on board, because now they've got a leadership team and they've got tons of employees, 30 employees roughly. And they're like, wow, I've got a lot of responsibility now, so now instead of just, supplying for my family or supporting my family, I've got 60 families or 30 families, and they've got kids and spouses and so forth. And so they start feeling that burden on their shoulders. Hey, I've got 100 people I'm looking after. I can't really make a mistake. And so that's where they, say, hey, can you come in and help us, guide us to make sure that we do things right, and where I can bounce questions off of, or help me grow, or help me maintain a profit margin of this, or help me build cash, or whatever the risk factors might be that we would need to come in and try to eliminate. That's when they start doing it there.
Any other commonalities you see, Michelle, among new clients that come on with us that kind of had led us in our direction?
I would fair to say that majority of it is one of those, and I laugh, one of my clients even says the back of the napkin just doesn't work anymore. Their growth has gotten so massive, and a lot of times it's the last thing that they want to deal with. It's been working so far, but they know they probably could go so much farther if they had the proper staff and the proper, support in that aspect. And I think that becomes such a first comment of relief that usually ends up coming from them during, once someone comes on board, is like, oh, this has been such a relief. I didn't want to deal with this stuff, but I knew it had to be done. Or I had no idea, I was flying by the seat of my pants type thing too, where it's like, okay, it's been working, but it needs some serious, or, if there's a change in staff, that's always a good opportunity too. Mm-hmm. If you're seeing something coming on board where possibly you do have someone in play and you're like, well, I don't know if I need the full in-house per se, but looking for something different, looking for a challenge, looking especially for that forward looking, that's really where it can come into play.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think a lot of times the CEO or the owner starts wearing a lot of hats, and some of the hats, the bigger you get a little heavier. And you're like, I don't want to wear this financial hat anymore. I need to give that to someone else. And so I think that's a lot of times what I see. It's like they're spread too thin, and they can't focus on what they actually are good at or what they want to be doing. And that's when they come to us. So that's very common.
Yeah. And they start to lose their passion, I think, because they're wearing so many hats.
Totally.
And, the reason why they started the business is not the same, because they're stuck in the weeds of stuff that they don't like. And so that's when, but sometimes it's hard to give up that power. But yeah, definitely you can tell it's like you need to release some of it.
Mm-hmm.
So any final thoughts, Jody or Michelle? I think we're close to time here, so make sure we wrap up. But any final thoughts before we exit the podcast?
Nope, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think got it covered.
Great. Well, I thank both of you guys for joining us. I know you're busy being virtual CFO out there in the world, but definitely appreciate your time. And in future episodes, Jody talked a lot about some of those KPIs, and we'll start digging into those. So I'm excited to dig into those with some other CFOs joining the show. So thanks for joining, Jody and Michelle, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy this episode? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving virtual CPA success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.